the promise ring. The amber light filtering through the cafe windows caught the ring perfectly, sending tiny rainbows dancing across the wooden table. Nora Chen stared at her trembling hand, unable to process what had just happened. Marcus Webb, the man she'd been dating for 8 months, was still on one knee beside their corner booth, his confident smile wavering slightly as seconds ticked by without an answer. "It was my grandmother's," he said softly, his voice carrying that same warmth that had first drawn her in at the university library where they'd met. Rose Webb. She wore this ring for 63 years, through the Great Depression, through World War II, through everything. When she passed last year, my mother gave it to me specifically for this moment. Nora's eyes filled with tears as she looked down at the vintage Art Deco setting. The center stone seemed to glow with inner fire, surrounded by delicate, smaller diamonds in an intricate platinum mounting. It was the most beautiful piece of jewelry she'd ever seen, let alone worn. More than that, it represented something she'd never dared to hope for, becoming part of a family legacy, being trusted with something irreplaceable. "Marcus, she whispered, her voice catching. "I can't believe you're trusting me with something so precious." Growing up in foster care had taught Nora to expect disappointment, to guard her heart against promises that rarely materialized. Her childhood had been a series of temporary placements, kind but distant caregivers, and the constant knowledge that she was just passing through. She'd never owned anything with history, never been part of a story that stretched back through generations. But here was Marcus, successful and educated, offering her not just his love but his family's most treasured heirloom. The weight of that trust felt overwhelming and wonderful at the same time. "She would have loved you," Marcus continued, still holding the ring box. "Grandma Rose always said the right woman would make this ring sing again. Look how it catches. The light on your hand. It's like it was made for you." Nora finally found her voice, barely managing a whispered yes before Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it truly had been waiting for her all along. The other cafe patrons began to clap, and Nora felt herself blushing as Marcus stood and kissed her softly. That evening, she called in sick to her job at the independent bookstore and spent hours researching vintage engagement rings online. She wanted to learn everything about caring for antique jewelry, about the history of Art Deco settings, about the proper way to clean and maintain something so valuable. Marcus had mentioned the ring was worth around $12,000, money she could never imagine spending on jewelry, but its sentimental value was priceless. As she traced the intricate patterns with her fingertip, Nora felt connected to Rose Webb in a way that surprised her. She imagined the young woman who had first worn this ring, the decades of love it had witnessed, the family celebrations and quiet moments it had been part of. Now she was the keeper of that history, the next chapter in the ring's story. For the first time in her life, Nora Chen felt like she truly belonged somewhere, to someone, to something bigger than herself. Part 2. Cracks in the Foundation 3. Years later, the ring had become as much a part of Nora as her own heartbeat. She'd grown accustomed to the way strangers' eyes lingered on it, the way fellow bookstore customers would gasp when she'd tell them about Rose Webb and her decades of devotion. The story had grown richer in the telling, how Rose had hidden the ring during air raids, how she'd polished it every Sunday after church, how she'd whispered prayers over it during her husband's illness. Nora had even started a small ritual of her own, cleaning the ring every Friday evening while she and Marcus watched movies together in their cozy apartment. She'd researched the proper techniques, invested in special jewelry cleaning solutions, and treated the piece with the reverence it deserved. Marcus would often smile watching her careful ministrations, sometimes joking that she loved the ring more than she loved him. "It's not about the ring," she'd always reply. It's about honoring your grandmother's memory. That April morning started like any other. Nora was rushing to open the bookstore early for a special author reading when disaster struck. While reaching for her keys from the kitchen counter, her ring caught on the edge of a ceramic planter she'd been meaning to move. The impact sent both the planter and her heart crashing to the floor. The plant and soil scattered everywhere, but all Nora could focus on was the small, glittering object that had rolled under the refrigerator. The center stone had popped clean, out of its setting, leaving the platinum band looking naked and wounded. Her hands shook so violently she could barely dial Marcus's number. "I broke it," she sobbed into the phone. "Marcus, I broke Rose's ring. The diamond just fell out." Hey, breathe!" Marcus's voice came through the speaker, though she could hear tension creeping in. "Accidents happen. We'll get it fixed. It's going to be okay." But it wasn't okay. As Nora crawled around the kitchen floor collecting the stone and the broken prongs, she felt like she'd shattered something sacred. This ring had survived the Great Depression, World War II, decades of daily wear. And she'd destroyed it in a moment of carelessness. Emil Kowalski had been repairing jewelry in the same downtown shop for 37 years. His weathered hands and thick glasses spoke of countless hours bent over workbenches, coaxing life back into broken treasures. Nora had chosen his shop specifically because of its reputation. Surely someone with his experience could restore Rose's ring to its former glory. "Let me take a look at what we're working with," Emil said gently, noting the tears in Nora's eyes as she carefully placed the stone and setting on his counter. He adjusted his magnifying lamp and picked up the stone with precision tweezers, rotating it slowly under the bright light. The silence stretched uncomfortably long. Emil's expression shifted from professional interest to something that looked almost like pity. He cleared his throat twice before speaking. "Miss, I'm not sure how to tell you this delicately, but this stone, it's not what you think it is." Nora's laugh came out sharp and disbelieving. "I'm sorry, what do you mean?" "It's my fiancé's grandmother's diamond. It's been in his family for generations." Emil set down his tools and looked at her with the patience of someone who'd delivered difficult news many times before. "I've been in this business since I was 14 years old. This is cubic zirconia, synthetic. Well-made synthetic, but synthetic nonetheless. The setting is real platinum, which is why it feels heavy, but this stone..." He held it up to the light. "Maybe $15 retail value, if that." The words hit Nora like physical blows. She actually took a step backward, shaking her head. "No, that's impossible. You're mistaken. This ring is worth $12,000. Marcus told me it was appraised when his grandmother died." Emil's expression softened further. "I'm truly sorry, but I stake my reputation on being able to identify stones. Would you like me to show you the differences?" The way light refracts through cubic zirconia versus genuine diamond is quite distinct once you know what to look for. Nora didn't want to see the differences. She wanted to snatch the stone back and storm out, find another jeweler who would confirm what she needed to hear. Instead, she found herself nodding numbly as Emil demonstrated how the synthetic stone dispersed light differently, how it felt slightly different under magnification, how the tiny inclusions that would mark a natural diamond were completely absent. By the time she left Emil's shop, Nora felt like she was floating outside her own body. The drive home passed in a blur of traffic lights and half-formed thoughts. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe the ring had been switched at some point. Maybe Rose's real ring was still in a safety deposit box somewhere, and this was just a placeholder Marcus had given her temporarily. But even as she tried to construct reasonable explanations, a cold certainty was settling in her chest. The way Marcus had seemed nervous when she'd called about the broken ring. The way he'd never wanted to get it formally appraised for insurance purposes. The way he'd changed the subject whenever she'd suggested visiting other elderly relatives, who might have known Rose and could share more stories about the ring. As she pulled into their apartment complex, Nora realized she was about to find out whether the man she'd planned to marry was the person she thought he was, or whether the last 3 years had been built on something as fake as the stone currently sitting in her purse. Part 3. The Unraveling. Truth Marcus was waiting in the living room when she returned, pretending to read but obviously listening for her key in the door. The guilty expression that flashed across his face when he saw her told Nora everything she needed to know before she even opened her mouth. "So," she said quietly, setting her purse on the coffee table. "Emil Kowalski says our family heirloom is worth about $15. "Nora." "Listen," Marcus started, but she held up her hand. "I need you to be very careful about what you say next, because I'm trying to give you the benefit of the doubt here. Is there any universe in which you didn't know this ring was fake when you gave it to me?" The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, a gesture she'd once found endearing, but now recognized as his tell when he was preparing to lie. "I was going to replace it," he finally said. "I swear to you, Nora, I was planning to get you a real ring. When I proposed, I didn't have the money for something nice, and I wanted the moment to be perfect. The fake was supposed to be temporary." "You had $8,000 in your savings account when you proposed," Nora said evenly. "I've seen the bank statements, Marcus. You had enough money for a down payment on a house, let alone an engagement ring." His face went from guilty to defensive in seconds. "You've been going through our financial records. What is wrong with you? Don't you trust me?" The deflection was so immediate and aggressive that Nora felt something cold settle in her stomach. This wasn't the reaction of someone who felt bad about a well-intentioned mistake. This was the reaction of someone who'd been caught and was angry about it. "Where did the ring come from?" she asked. "I bought it online. Look, it doesn't matter. Where?" "And the story about your grandmother Rose, about her wearing it through the Depression and World War II, about how she'd hidden it during air raids and polished it every Sunday." Marcus wouldn't meet her eyes. "I thought it would make the ring more special. I thought you'd like having that history. You made up a dead grandmother's entire life story to make me feel connected to your family." Nora's voice was still eerily calm, but inside she felt like she was screaming. "I've been telling that story for 3 years, Marcus. I've been honoring a completely fictional woman's memory." "Rose was real," he protested weakly. The ring wasn't hers." That night, while Marcus snored peacefully beside her as, if nothing had changed, Nora sat at their kitchen table with her laptop. She'd always been meticulous about organizing their shared documents and photos, but now she was looking for something specific. If Marcus could lie so easily about the ring, what else had he lied about? What she found made her stomach turn. Their shared cloud storage contained years of backed-up text messages, including conversations from Marcus's old phone that he'd probably forgotten about. The thread between Marcus and his college roommate. Jasper Reed started just days after the proposal. Marcus: "Dude, she totally bought the family heirloom story. Hook, line, and sinker." Jasper: "Seriously? The fake diamond trick worked?" Marcus: "Better than I expected. She literally cried when I told her about Grandma Rose. She's been treating that cheap ring like it's the crown jewels. It's actually kind of hilarious how gullible she is." Jasper: "You're terrible, man. But also genius. Save yourself thousands and she's none the wiser." Marcus: "The best part is she's so grateful. Like genuinely grateful that I trusted her with something so precious. She keeps thanking me for making her part of my family history. I swear she loves that fake ring more than she loves me." Jasper: "What happens when she finds out?" Marcus: "She won't. Girls like Nora don't know anything about jewelry. She's never had anything nice in her life, so she wouldn't recognize quality if it bit her. Besides, she's way too invested in the story now. Even if someone told her it was fake, she'd probably convince herself they were wrong." The messages continued for months. with Marcus regularly updating Jasper on Nora's obsession with the ring, laughing about her careful cleaning rituals, mocking the way she'd researched vintage jewelry care techniques. They'd turned her love and reverence into their private entertainment. But the worst message came from 6 months ago, when Jasper had apparently suggested Marcus come clean. Marcus, why would I ruin a good thing? She's the perfect girlfriend. Because she thinks she owes me for this grand romantic gesture. She cooks, she cleans, she never complains when I work late or go out with the guys. She's so grateful for that stupid ring that she'd probably let me get away with murder. I'm not giving that up for the sake of honesty. Jasper. What if she wants to get it appraised for insurance? Marcus. Already handled. I told her my family policy covers it. And she believed that too. Honestly, Jazz, I could tell her the moon is made of cheese, and she'd probably start researching lunar dairy farms. Nora read every single message twice, her hands growing steadier with each cruel joke, each casual dismissal of her intelligence and worth. By the time she closed the laptop, something fundamental had shifted inside her. The hurt was still there, raw and burning, but it was now accompanied by something else entirely. If Marcus thought she was gullible, if he believed she was too grateful and naive to ever see through his deceptions, then she would show him exactly how wrong he was. But first, she was going to let him think he'd won. After all, she'd learned from the master himself that the best lies were the ones wrapped in just enough truth to feel genuine. Part 4. The Perfect Performance. The next morning, Nora woke up before Marcus and made his favorite breakfast. Blueberry pancakes with real maple syrup, the expensive kind he'd grown up with but claimed they couldn't afford now that they were saving for a wedding. She hummed softly while she cooked, the same way she had during their early dating days when everything felt effortless and genuine. When Marcus shuffled into the kitchen, clearly braced for another confrontation about the ring, he found his loving fiancé setting a perfectly plated breakfast in front of his usual chair. I owe you an apology, Nora said, pouring his coffee exactly the way he liked it. 2 sugars, splash of cream, stirred counterclockwise. I was being materialistic yesterday. You're absolutely right that the ring doesn't matter. What matters is that you wanted to make me happy, even when money was tight. The relief that washed over Marcus's face would have been comical if it weren't so infuriating. He actually relaxed his shoulders like he'd been carrying the weight of his deception and could finally set it down. I knew you'd understand, he said, reaching across to squeeze her hand. That's what I love about you, Nora. You're not like other women who only care about expensive things. Of course not, she smiled, filing away that casual insult with all the others. Love isn't about money or jewelry. It's about trust and partnership. Over the following weeks, Nora became the most devoted fiancé Marcus could have imagined. She planned elaborate date nights, left encouraging notes in his work bag, and listened with rapt attention to his office complaints that she now recognized as barely veiled bragging. She complimented his appearance, supported his ambitions, and never once brought up the ring again. But while she played the adoring partner on the surface, Nora was methodically dismantling their shared life underneath. First, she opened her own checking account at a different bank, claiming she wanted to start saving for a surprise honeymoon fund. Marcus found this gesture so romantic that he didn't question why she needed a separate account for it. She began transferring small amounts from their joint savings, $20 here, $50 there, amounts too small for him to notice. But that added up quickly. She also started documenting everything with the precision of a private investigator. When Marcus claimed he was working late, she'd call his office after hours to confirm. When no one answered, she'd note the discrepancy in a password-protected file on her laptop. She began recognizing patterns. The nights he came home smelling like unfamiliar perfume always coincided with emergency client meetings. The expensive dinners on their credit card that he claimed were business expenses happened on evenings when he'd told her he was grabbing fast food with colleagues. Most importantly, Nora began making herself indispensable to their financial life. She volunteered to take over bill paying, claiming she wanted to help with household management as they prepared for marriage. Marcus was delighted to hand over these responsibilities, especially when Nora proved to be incredibly organized and efficient. What he didn't realize was that Nora was now the only one who fully understood their financial picture. She knew about every account, every investment, every debt. She quietly changed passwords and added her name to accounts where it had been missing. When Marcus absently signed documents she put in front of him, trusting her completely, he was actually giving her access to assets he'd kept in his name alone. 3 months into her performance, Nora made her first major move. She scheduled a consultation with Diana Torres, a divorce attorney known for her aggressive representation of women in high-asset divorces. Diana's office was everything Nora had expected: sleek, professional, and expensive. "I haven't filed for divorce yet," Nora explained during their initial meeting, "but I need to understand my options when I do." The final curtain. Nora chose a Tuesday morning in October to change Marcus's life forever, exactly 6 months after she'd discovered the truth about the ring. There was a poetic justice to the timing that appealed to her. Tuesdays had always been their quiet days, when they'd drink coffee together and plan their week. Today, she was planning to end their relationship with the same methodical precision she'd used to document his lies. Marcus was buttering his toast, scrolling through his phone and humming contentedly, when Nora placed a manila folder next to his coffee mug. "What's this?" he asked absently, not looking up from his screen. "Divorce papers," Nora said calmly, sipping her own coffee. "I filed yesterday. You've been served." The phone clattered onto the table as Marcus stared at her in shock. "What are you talking about? This isn't funny, Nora." "I'm not joking. I'm divorcing you, Marcus. I'm also keeping the apartment since I've been paying the full rent for the past 4 months while you thought I was contributing to our joint wedding fund. I've documented every lie you've told me, every time you've mocked me to your friends, every dollar you've spent on things you claimed we couldn't afford." Marcus's face went through a rapid succession of emotions: confusion, disbelief, anger, and finally something that looked like panic. "You can't be serious. We're getting married in 3 months. The invitations are already sent." "The invitations you made me pay for while you spent our wedding fund on golf trips and expensive dinners with other women, those invitations?" Nora opened the folder and pulled out bank statements highlighted in yellow. "I hope your co-workers enjoyed that $700 dinner at Le Bernardin last month. The one you told me was a boring client meeting at Applebee's." "You've been spying on me," Marcus accused, his voice rising. "Going through my private accounts, stalking me." "I've been protecting myself," Nora corrected. "Something I should have done 3 years ago when you gave me a $15 ring and convinced me it was a priceless family heirloom." She pulled out printed screenshots of his text messages with Jasper, watching Marcus's face go pale as he recognized his own words. "You thought I was too grateful and gullible to ever see through your lies? You told Jasper I'd probably let you get away with murder because I was so thankful for that stupid ring, remember?" "Nora, those messages, they were just guy talk." "I didn't mean any of it." "You meant every word," she said quietly. "And what's worse is that you were right. I was grateful. I did think I was lucky to have you. I spent 3 years making myself smaller so you'd feel bigger, accepting your casual cruelties because I thought that's what love looked like." Marcus tried a different approach, his voice taking on the gentle tone he'd always used when he wanted something from her. "Baby, we can work through this. I know I messed up with the ring, but we love each other. We can go to counseling. I can make it up to you." "With what money?" Nora interrupted. "The savings account you've been draining for months? The credit cards you've maxed out on expenses you hid from me? Or maybe you were planning to take out another loan against the car you claimed was paid off?" The color drained completely from Marcus's face as he realized the depth of her knowledge. How do you... You can't have access to all that information. I can when you sign documents without reading them, Nora said, pulling out a power of attorney form with his signature at the bottom. You trusted me completely with our finances, remember? You thought it was so sweet that I wanted to help with household management. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where she'd soon be walking as a free woman. My attorney says you'll probably keep the car and your 401k, minus what you owe me for the money you stole from our joint accounts. I'm keeping everything else, the apartment, the furniture, the savings you don't know I moved, and my self-respect. This is insane, Marcus said, his voice cracking. You can't destroy our entire relationship over a stupid ring. Nora turned, back to face him, and for the first time in months, she let him see who she really was. Not the grateful, naive girl he'd been manipulating, but a woman who'd spent years learning to survive in a world that didn't protect her. I'm not destroying our relationship over a ring, Marcus. I'm ending it because you never respected me enough to build it on truth in the first place. You saw a lonely girl with no family and decided she'd be easy to control. You were wrong. 6 weeks later, Nora sat in Judge Patricia Holloway's courtroom, watching Marcus's attorney argue for a more equitable distribution of assets. It was a futile effort. Nora's documentation was too thorough, her evidence too compelling. Diana Torres had prepared a case that was both legally airtight and emotionally devastating. When Judge Holloway read the final settlement awarding Nora nearly everything she'd asked for, Marcus looked across the courtroom at her with something she'd never seen in his eyes before: genuine respect. It had only taken her completely destroying his financial security for him to finally see her as an equal. That evening, Nora sat in her apartment now, and looked down at her bare ring finger. For 3 years, she'd defined herself by that fake symbol of fake love. Now, for the first time since she was 26 years old, her hands belonged entirely to herself. She thought about Rose Webb, the fictional grandmother whose made-up story had meant so much to her. In a strange way, she was grateful for that lie, too. It had taught her that the most important family legacy she could inherit was the strength to recognize her own worth. The next morning, Nora would start her new life. Debt-free, financially, secure, and finally, genuinely free. But tonight, she was going to do something she'd never done before. She was going to sit in her own home, surrounded by things that belonged to her, and plan a future built entirely on truth. It was the most beautiful ring she'd never worn.